Mic check, mic check. Are we working? Looks like we're working. All right. Well, if anybody ever sees this, this is Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. And I'm going to be going through this. So I watched Jordan Peterson's interview. Or actually, I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched part of Jordan Peterson's interview some years back when it came out, whenever that was. And same thing with Michaela Peterson when she interviewed him. I watched part of it, and I was just got this feeling like this guy's a scumbag. I don't want to listen to what he has to say. But then my wife went to the library and got his book, and she was like, "Maybe you want to read it. Maybe I want to read it." I was like, "All right, I'll take a look at it. May as well." And so this is what I came up with. I didn't read the whole thing. I didn't even read very much of it at all. I skimmed through it a bit, and then I went through the table of contents in detail because he provides very helpfully a very detailed table of contents. And so here's all the 48 rules. I've reworded some of them because I found his wording less than ideal, but take that as one may. And so I'm just going to go through these and say something about them. So like overview, big picture. I feel like I'm approaching this from both from a Catholic perspective and from a perspective of Jordan Peterson's kind of trying to integrate with his ideas about psychology and things like that. So the first thing that strikes me is in the interview, and there's a link to the video in the description here. In his interview, Jordan Peterson asks him, "Hey, this seems kind of deceptive and manipulative. Like, what's up?" And Robert Greene says, "Oh, no, it's not deceptive and manipulative. It's not amoral. It's just, good advice. It's mostly good advice." Well, it's like 2/3, not manipulative. I mean, there is some manipulative stuff in there, but it's like 2/3 not manipulative. So I went through and counted, and by my count, 27 out of the 48 laws, which is more than half, are explicitly deceptive or manipulative. And then there's another 3 or 4 that are like, they're not deceptive per se, but they're immoral, I think, in other ways. So I just went through, and there's a link to this spreadsheet also. And so I just went through the rules, and here's the rule title. Here's the moral hazard that I see in them. If something leapt out at me, it's like, oh, that's like morally a problem. And the numbers are referring to the commandments. So that's like the number of the commandments. And I'm using my nine commandments set. So anyway, that's what the numbering is. And then practical problems. If it's like, usually if there was a moral problem, I didn't go on to list practical problems or whatever. It's just like, well, this is a moral problem. This is off limits. And so then if there wasn't a moral problem, if there was a practical problem, I was like, oh, well, I'll make a note on that. And then I also tried to see where the rules contradicted themselves, because I felt like that obviously one can finagle the whole system so that they don't contradict themselves. Like, well, it looks like contradicts, but under the surface it doesn't. But I was just kind of trying to take these at face value and see if there are contradictions inside the system itself, which is another indication that maybe it's not complete or really workable as a coherent system. So the impression I got overall is that Robert Greene in this book appears to be portraying the ways of acting as if power is the ultimate good. So that's an immediate violation of the first rule, the first commandment. Have no other gods before me. In this case, he's saying, well, you should be. Not only should you be seeking power, but you should be seeking to maximize your power. So you don't. He seems to be giving advice for people who, even if they have power, want more of it, right? So it's like this power maximizing game, and just like, I think that's an immoral game. I think that you shouldn't be trying to do that. You should know who God is and that you are not him, and then you should also. So that's the first commandment. And then you should also recognize your superiors, your parents, your authorities, people who are in a place of maybe excellence, or maybe just, they have their own power. And so that's the fourth commandment: honor your father and your mother. And so it seems like the entire premise of the book is in violation of those two commandments. And there's also a lot of what indication that it's in violation of the what seventh commandment, thou shalt not steal. Although I don't know if he makes it explicit anywhere, but there's this implication that there's going to be these Machiavellian schemes going on, and you're going to be undercutting people and taking their stuff, and it's all in order to gain ability to, plunder everyone around you, or whatever it is, right? So that it's not exactly explicit. I think there might be a couple in here that seem to be. No, I didn't put number 7 down at all, but there's this kind of undercurrent, and that's how the commandments go, right? Those three first, the first of all 3 sets are kind of related to each other, and then there's the second set, which is to not take God's name in vain, right? To speak truthfully, and the entire thing is also kind of based on this premise. Some of the laws of power, some of the 48 laws of power, explicitly say this is, you need to be deceptive in these ways, and so like right out of the gate, that's immoral. Like I said, 27 of them are either manipulative or deceptive, and but then on top of that, there's this kind of undercurrent throughout the whole thing of don't be forthright, don't tell people what's going on, don't make your plans aware, don't make people aware of your plans, be cagey and careful and sneaky and crafty, and that just doesn't seem to be in keeping with like the second, fifth, and 8th commandments, where you're supposed to be forthright and honest with your dealings. And this comes back to something Jordan Peterson says in his rules, which is speak the truth, or at least don't lie. And it's like, well, it seems like those are in direct opposition to each other, right? Like if you're being deceptive, then you're instrumentalizing speech. You're using speech as a tool in order to gain power instead of using speech in order to rightly order the world, in Peterson's kind of language. So I feel like most of the book is in violation of those 2. And then there's also this third set, which is keeping the Sabbath, which is basically honoring God's desires. And then, what is it? Do not murder, which is, of all the commandments, I feel like thou shalt not murder is the most in keeping with these rules, because he says one of them even is, let's see, we'll go through all these, but one of them is prefer seduction to force. So don't coerce people. But it's like, well, seduction is basically in violation of the 5th commandment, so you can't really win on that one. But I feel like this is most in keeping with the 7th commandment, if one were going to give it credit where credit is due. And so not great. And then the 9th commandment, thou shalt not covet, which is basically like allow your desires to be themselves, right? Don't suborn your desires to other people's desires, and which is basically what seduction is, only reversed. It's getting other people to desire the things that you want, so that they do what you want instead of them doing what's best for them and doing things that they want. So I feel like there's a lot of kind of subtextual 9th commandment violations in throughout this set of rules. So anyway, like of the 9 commandments, it breaks 8 of them pretty strongly. So let's go through in detail now and see where this lies. So so Jordan Peterson, speak the truth or at least don't lie. And then there's also well, we'll get there. All right, so rule number 1, never outshine the master. So the idea here is people are prideful, and so you should accommodate their pride by never appearing to be superior to them. There's this one. There's a few others, I think, that are they're playing to this kind of rule. And whenever you get a large number of rules like this, like can't even fit them on a page, right? 48 of them. There's going to be some overlap. So I feel like this could have been pared down, and like Jordan did 12, which is kind of the upper limit for like how large one can make a set of coherent systems that, you know, have complex interactions. But 48 is just way too many. So anyway, that's another topic. There's like, I did an analysis of the 100 lenses of game design. What is that called? The Art of Game Design, a book of lenses. And so there's 100 lenses in here. And so I analyzed them, and there's like a ton of overlap. So that's just another problem that he has. But anyway, we'll go through them all. Since he went through the trouble of writing them, we'll go through the trouble of reading them. How are we doing here? You have any chat? Nobody's in chat. All right, good. No viewers, no chat. Cool. You can just keep moving at our own pace. All right, so rule number 1, never outshine the master. So this is accommodating pride, which is not great. And it also seems like it will feed sloth. Like, oh, well, I could do this thing, but then it would, you know, make this other person look bad. So I'm just going to, you know, slide by and not do it. So sloth and feeding pride, not good things. And obviously there's some practical problems there too. Mistrust friends and use enemies. He's basically saying that if you have friends, they're going to be envious of you, and they're going to betray you. So you should just not count on them, and instead you should use your enemies. And basically, if you can turn an enemy, then he'll be much more useful to you than a friend would be. And in Jordan Peterson's cosmology or whatever, he has the principle that you shouldn't have friends that are envious and trying to undercut you, right? Like this seems like the whole book is built on this premise that like you're in this horrific tyrannical system that's been constructed in such a way that you can't win by being a good person. So here's all the ways that you can justify being a bad person because, oh, well, it's what everyone's doing and you have to do it. So you could look at the book in that way as well, that it's a system of justification for immorality. Anyway, so mistrust friends and use enemies. It presumes betrayal. And we can see in the life of Christ that he did not do this, right? Like he trusted his friends and he was betrayed, but that's the proper way to be. Like that, you have to give people the opportunity to betray you in order to demonstrate that you really trust them. And so I think that this is not heroic. That's another thing. A lot of these just don't seem very heroic to me. Like this isn't the way the hero would behave. This is the way the scumbag vizier is, right? Like this is like handbook for being a scumbag vizier. Okay, well, maybe I don't want to be that. Conceal your intentions. There's nothing really wrong with this. The practical problem is it hinders coordination, because if you've got a plan, if you're trying to do something and you want help with it, you either have to be smart enough to be able to figure it all out yourself, or you need to tell people what your intentions are so that they can help you figure out how to get there. And so this, like, maybe it would work if you're really smart, but if you're not super smart, you can't get by concealing your intentions. You have to help. You have to let other people help you get to where you're going. So that's just a practical problem. Say less than necessary. Again, it hinders communication. It's not a winning strategy if you really are not smart enough to figure it all out yourself. And also, if you want to communicate something to someone, if you really actually have something useful to say to them, then saying less than necessary is obviously less than necessary, right? Like you need to say at least what is necessary, not less than it. So anyway, this is like about building mystique and like being what is the word, sphinx-like. He uses the word sphinx-like, like being sphinx-like and mysterious and stuff. It's like, okay, well, yeah, speak in riddles. Uh, and Christ did speak in parables, but he said what was necessary. He didn't say less than what was necessary. So it's not bad advice. It's just bad advice. Fight with reputation. So this is basically like defend your reputation and make sure that you undercut everyone else's reputation. And so I feel like this violates the fifth commandment. This is a violation of your contracts with others. And it's also kind of a violation of the eighth commandment. It's invalidating your own experience. It's not. It's bearing false witness of others is basically what he's proposing in this rule. So I mean, like, it is important to. Well, I don't know. I don't know if it is important to be aware of your own reputation. I don't know. I don't like this rule. I don't want to be thinking about what other people think about me. I just don't want to spend my time on that. Like, they can think those things. That's fine. Like, I don't know what they are, and I don't want to know what they are. If you have something to say to me, great. If you want to do something, great. And there is some rules down here that talk about that, about like, don't worry too much about words. There's also a proverb, I believe, in Proverbs in the Bible about don't listen too closely to what your servants say about you, for you have probably said bad things about others in the past. Something like that. And so it's like, well, yeah, I don't think that your reputation should weigh too heavily on you. Court attention at all costs. Rule number 6. It feeds pride. It's just, like, hey, look at me. Hey, look at me. I'm the best. I'm the greatest. Everyone should pay attention to me. No. Turns out. Delegate, but take the credit. Oh, this is just super scummy. So this is like, get people to do things for you, but then take the credit when it succeeds. And it's just like, well, yeah, that's dishonest. Don't do that. Make others move first. So this one, I think, is actually pretty good advice. This is basically saying, set up the play space and then make others come into your arena. Basically, stay in your arena, make others come to you, and that way you'll have control of the environment so that you can win. Rig the game so that you can win. It's like, okay, if you are able to convince people to come and play your rigged game, yeah, that's not bad. I feel like this wouldn't work against me, which kind of makes it bad advice, where it's like, I don't want to play someone else's rigged game. And this is kind of a meta comment also, that like, make others move first basically means that play the game you want to play instead of letting other people dictate what game you play. But like, the entire set of rules, the entire book is based on the premise that you want to play the game of power. And I don't want to play the game of power. That seems like a stupid game. It's a rigged game, right? Someone else has set up this rigged game, and here are all the ways. That's also like, he's saying this whole book is, here's how you can play by the rules of the rigged game of those people who tend to get to the top. And okay, but like, what about rule 8? Make others move first. Like, I don't want to play the game where people are trying to backstab each other in order to get power. I want to. Yeah, that's not a game I'm interested in playing. So, like, Rule 8 basically violates the entire set of rules, or invalidates them for me, in my mind. So, anyway, that's a meta comment on, like, the thing. But practically speaking, also, it hinders movement, because if you've got your whole thing set up, and you've got your whole scheme and your whole arena, right, you're kind of stuck there. So, like, if you want to go do something, well, how do you make others move first if you want to go and do something, right? Like, it hinders that whole process. It's a lot of inertia. Rule number 9, win with actions, not with words. So this, I think, is also pretty good advice. There have been times when there was an argument going on about, like, should we do this or should we do that? And I just, like, got up, didn't say anything, and went and did the thing and got it done. And, like, they were still talking about it, and I came back, I'm like, it's finished. I fixed the problem. And that way, it got done the way I wanted, so that I win. And also, I didn't have to say anything, and like I didn't have to convince anyone. You just got it done. So, when possible, yeah, that's good. The downside is that action is painful and talk is cheap. So sometimes it's important to win with words so that you can get other people to do the actions for you. And this also, I mean, where possible, yeah, it's good advice. But this also kind of undercuts a lot of the other rules, because a lot of the rules are about getting other people to do stuff for you instead of doing it yourself. It's like, well, but then whose actions, right? Like, can you get other people to do the actions for you? So anyway, yeah, actions are more powerful, but they're also more expensive, I guess is the point. Number 10, avoid the unhappy and unlucky. So this idea is that people who are in trouble can drag you down, and then you both drown. So just stay away from those people. Like if someone's having a bad time, just go somewhere else. Find someone else. And the problem with this is that it's not. You can't be a good friend, right? If someone's you've got a friend who's in trouble, you got to help him out. Like, they're your friend. You're supposed to be a good friend. You should be a good person. Part of being a good person is being heroic, and this is not heroic. It's also basically this. I think this is as close as he gets to portraying the underworld, like the unhappy, the unlucky, the people who are in catastrophe, the people who are having problems. Like, that's the underworld in an interpersonal sense. That going into that person's life and confronting their problems with them, or uncovering that set of complexity is the underworld. And so this is as close as he gets to addressing that idea, I think, in the rule that addresses that most closely. And he basically says, don't go to the underworld willingly, which is the violation of the heroic principle, which is face the underworld and step into it willingly and knowingly with your eyes open, so that you don't get hurled there head first and backward against your will. And so, this is just not heroic. Number 11, keep others dependent on you. Basically, don't let others gain independence. Don't let others become too skillful, because then they won't need you, and you need them to need you so that you are important. And this is just the edible nightmare. So don't do that either. That's a bad idea. Number 12, use selective honesty and selective generosity. Again, I don't have a problem with this per se. It's just the selective part that's the problem. Like, why can't you just say be honest and generous? Right? Like, couldn't that be the rule? And of course, that would invalidate a lot of the other rules. So be honest and generous, yes. Be selectively honest and selectively generous? No, I can't really get on board with that. Number 13. So this is one of the ones that I think I can wholeheartedly endorse. Rule number 13, appeal to self-interest instead of mercy or gratitude. And the idea here is, if you need something from somebody, don't go simpering and whining to them. Oh, I helped you out a bunch of times. Can you help me out? Oh, I'm in this terrible strait. Oh, I'm feeling so bad, and this is so. I need help me. I'm feeling. I need your mercy. You go to them and you say, hey, this is going to be good for you. There's this thing, and it's going to turn out, and you're going to like it, and sell it. And yeah, that's great advice. Even in the Psalms, when David's crying out to God, God help me, I'm in this terrible problem. Even David appeals to God's self-interest. He says multiple times, oh, God, the people in hell, the people in death, the people who are cast down into the pit, they won't praise you. And I'm going to praise you if you get me out of this, and you'll like that, right? You want to be famous and adored. And I can't adore you if I'm dead, so help me out of here. And so I think it's great. I think this is great advice. Even David appeals to God's self-interest when he needs help from God. So I think that we could all follow this without any compunction. Rule number 13. First one I can fully endorse. Rule number 14, pose as a friend and work as a spy. Another good one. Basically, keep your eyes open, pay attention, and have your wits about you, and notice things, especially about other people. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with noticing things. There's nothing wrong with paying attention. And so I think that rule number 14, 13 and 14, right next to each other. Good advice. Number 15, crush your enemy totally. So this is Machiavellian's rule, never wound a prince. And it's the same kind of thing. Or I forget, it's in the Book of the Five Rings, it's in Sun Tzu's Art of War. I forget the references there, but the idea is that if you, when you defeat your enemy, if you leave anything of them, they will recover and return to destroy you. And so just don't leave anything. Completely defeat your enemy. And this is also kind of like rule 20 or 40, what is it? 42. Similar to rule 42, but we'll get there. But yeah, crush your enemy totally. So it's not a bad rule in principle. Like it's safe. The problem I see with it is it sets a bad precedent. And it's also in violation with itself. So let's see, we didn't talk about court attention at all costs. Yeah. So going back to court attention at all costs, it violates rule 3, conceal your intentions. It seems like if you're trying to get attention, but you're also trying to not get attention, that doesn't work well together. Rule 3 and rule 6 don't seem to work well together. And then rule 15, the way I'm doing the contradiction is they only go from bottom to top, so the later ones contradict with the earlier ones. I didn't go through and like collate those so that the earlier ones contradict with the later ones, if that makes sense. It's one way, so that I didn't duplicate any of this. But rule 15 inverted contradicts with itself, because if you crush your enemies totally, then you can expect your enemies to crush you totally, and it seems like you don't want to be crushed totally, so you shouldn't do that. It's in violation of the golden rule, right? Do to others as you'd have them do to you. So it seems like I guess it's a golden rule violation. Here, we'll put that in there. There. Number 16, honor through absence. This basically means what absence makes the heart grow fonder, or the idea is that if you are around all the time, then people are going to get tired of you. But once you're established in a group, if you pop out and are gone, then it gives people time to reflect on your better qualities and remember you fondly and stuff. And so you'll seem more mysterious and attractive if you're not there all the time. So okay, could be good advice. The downside is that it seems to assume that you are useless if you can just like leave whenever. If you are actually being useful to people and doing things that are helpful, then you can't just hop out and leave, right? This is kind of like it assumes that you're some kind of dandy, right, that doesn't have any responsibilities and can just kind of like float around and do whatever. It's like, if you've got obligations, then like fulfill those obligations. You can't just like wander off. So that seems to be a practical problem. I guess it could also be a violation of the 5th commandment to honor your obligations, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem like great advice. Let's see, a notification here. What's this? All right. Good. Okay, there we go. What do we got? Viewers 0. Good. See, I don't have obligations. I could pop out whenever I want. All right. Rule number 17. Be unpredictable. So, not necessarily immoral advice. It seems to violate the 5th commandment to like honor your obligations and do what you say you're going to do. So like, I guess there's a line between being unpredictable and being unreliable, but those seem to kind of, there seems to be some overlap there. It also hinders coordination, right? If people can't tell what you're doing, then it's going to be hard for them to work with you. And then also seems like it violates the fifth rule of power, which is to fight with reputation, to like maintain your reputation at all costs. Like if you're unpredictable, then how are you going to get a reputation for things? So that seems like it's not workable internally or externally. Hiding crowds, not in castles. So this is interesting. It's not a bad idea exactly. I mean, it certainly would work for an assassin. The downside I see with this is that it makes it difficult to defend others. If you are blending in with the crowd and, you know, kind of... the idea is that if you build a castle and a fortress and hide there, then you're isolated and you make yourself a target so that other people can just... They know where you are and they can attack you reliably. It's kind of... it goes in with the be unpredictable rule. So, like, if you're predictably right there in your fortress, then people can lay siege to the fortress and overthrow you, and it's just a matter of time. Whereas if you're blending in with the crowd and kind of milling around with people and people don't know where you are, they can't attack you. If they don't know where you are, then you're unassaultable, right? Or unassailable if you're invisible. And this is also kind of one of the key rules of power, I think. It like gets close to the heart of the idea of these rules. But it also seems to violate rule of power number 5, fight with reputation, right? Because if you're blending in with the crowd, then how are you going to get a reputation? And rule number 6, court attention at all costs. Like, you can't blend in with the crowd if you're also drawing attention to yourself all the time. That doesn't seem to work. And it also seems to violate rule number 7, to delegate but then take the credit. Because if you're taking credit for stuff, then like you're drawing attention to yourself. So like, it doesn't seem to be a workable defense strategy if you're doing these things. Now, obviously, you don't have to do all the rules of power all the time, but if they're rules and not guidelines, then it seems like you can't just go around making rules that violate the other rules. So anyway, hiding crowds down in castles, not a bad idea sometimes, but also castles allow you to defend others, right? If you're just milling around in a crowd, you can't defend other people. So this also doesn't seem very heroic, I guess is what I'm saying. Number 19, don't deceive the wrong person. So this is basically saying some people won't forgive you for deceiving them. So be sure to figure that out before you go and lie to them. The assumption being that you're going to be lying to most people. So just like occasionally don't lie to some people. And selective is the problem. I think that, and this also goes back to Jordan Peterson's idea of the divine individual, that each person should not be lied to. Like each individual person is the kind of person that even if they would forgive you, shouldn't forgive you for lying to them, for deceiving them, right? You should imagine that each person is the kind of person that has the moral quality to hold you to account to the highest moral standards. So, like, the wrong person is every person, as far as deception goes, in my mind. Rule number 20, do not commit to anyone and do not take sides. So, again, this isn't wrong, per se. It's certainly helpful when judging between different causes and different cases. You don't want to be prejudiced. You don't want to be like, well, you know, I like this guy. He's my buddy, so I'm just going to be on his side no matter what. But on the other hand, like, you do have to make a call at some point. And yeah, maybe it's best if you don't make it too personal, but you should also, if someone's demonstrated themselves to be trustworthy, you should like make that call and be like, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about, and he's on board with what we're doing here, the game we're playing. So I guess if the game is not taking sides, then yeah, don't take sides. But it would also make it hard to make friends, I think, if you're never committing to anybody. Number 21, feign stupidity to find an opening. This is basically saying don't appear to be smarter than your opponent, so that they'll let their guard down, and then you can find a way to take them down. This kind of feels like it reminds me of like drunken boxing, where you appear to not have full control of your faculties, where you're luring the opponent into a false sense of security. And it's not exactly wrong. It risks violating the 8th commandment bearing false witness against someone. Not really, because you're talking about yourself, so it's not like bearing false witness against someone else. It's bearing false witness against yourself. I don't know that this is bad advice. It seems kind of questionable, and it's interesting that this is the question. This is the rule that Jordan Peterson brought up when he was asking at the very beginning of the video that I linked there, when he's asking Robert Greene, what is it that you are doing here? It seems like you're a scumbag. He didn't say it that way, but that's kind of what he meant. So yeah, this just kind of seems questionable. And I mean, full disclosure, I've done this in the past several times, all the time, really, probably. I'm blessed to be very smart, and so in order to communicate with anyone, I have to kind of tone it down. I have to pull it back and be like, well, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, and maybe I'm kind of a dummy, I guess. And so I do this. So I don't think that it's wrong, but you have to be careful with it. And so anyway, yeah. 22. Surrender when defeat is likely. No problem with this. Like, don't let your pride get in the way of your life, right? Be willing to surrender and concede the victory to someone else. And this is like, this is when President Donald Trump got in trouble, right? Oh no, he didn't win, I won. I'm the winner. I win all the time, right? Well, no, you got to know when to surrender. Got to know when you're defeated. It seems to violate rule of power number 15, inverted, right? If someone else is going to crush you completely when you are defeated, then it doesn't seem like you should surrender. So there's a rule in chess, which is always plan on the opponent making the best move. Yeah, making the best move. Don't plan on your enemy making a bad move. Plan on your opponent making the best move, and then make your strategy around them making the best move. And then if they make a worse move, hey, it's great, because you've got some edge there. But plan on them making the best move. So if your opponent is following the rules of power, then it seems like rule of power 22 is in violation of rule 15, because if they're going to crush you totally when you surrender, then you shouldn't surrender, because you're going to be crushed totally, right? So that's not gonna win for you. So not a bad idea. I think rule 22 is probably actually good, and rule 15 is probably the problem in this case. But there you have it. Rule 23, concentrate your efforts. This is basically saying don't waste your time with people who can't help you. This is like in cultivating relationships and in finding a patron. Go for the one who's really going to support you, and don't waste your time with a bunch of other people. Get your sights on what you're trying to do. And again, this isn't bad. Take aim. Basically, take aim at a lofty goal. It would be one of Jordan Peterson's rules. So not a bad rule in itself, but it seems to violate or contradict rules 1, 3, 17, and 18 in the rules of power. So there you go. And then rule 24, the central rule, halfway through, play the perfect courtier. And this is just the summary of this book. This book should have been called Robert Greene's Rules for Being the Perfect Courtier. Because that's basically, I I'm pretty sure what this book is. And if it were couched in those ways, I think maybe it wouldn't be such a problem for me. But it seems like in trying to generalize it, that he has run afoul of. He's saying these are rules for life, basically, instead of rules for being a courtier. So, anyway, play the perfect courtier. Okay. I mean, like, if you are a courtier, then I suppose you should be a perfect one. I obviously disagree with Robert Greene on what exactly that looks like, but the advice itself is sound. Rule 25, recreate yourself. So this is basically, don't let other people define you, define yourself, and don't let people's perceptions of you or stereotypes hinder your ability to accomplish what you want. And this seems to be like good advice in our cultural context, but I think it actually is in violation of the fourth commandment to honor your father and mother, because you are a product of your parents and of your culture and ultimately of God's creative drive. So you can't create yourself, you can't recreate yourself, and in recreating yourself, you're destroying your old self, which is not honoring your parents, not honoring your heritage, not honoring where you came from. And so I think this is actually an immoral advice here, to recreate yourself. You should certainly renew yourself as much as you can anyway. But to recreate yourself, to kind of like make a new self out of whole cloth. Also, it's just like, are you Superman? Like, that's an objection that Jordan Peterson has a number of times. Like, okay, you're just going to create your own values. You're just going to, recreate your entire self. Like, where are you going to stand while you're doing that, right? When you metamorphose, what kind of chrysalis are you going to need? This also seemed to be in violation of the fifth rule of power. A lot of them do. Fight with reputation. Because if you change yourself, then it seems like your reputation is also going to have to be restarted and, start from the ground up or whatever. And people aren't going to forget who you were before. So it's not going to work out too well for you. Rule 26, keep your hands clean. So this is basically saying do bad things, but let other people take the fall for them. It's kind of like the inversion of, Rule 2? No. Others take the credit. Rule 7. Rule of Power 7. So it's kind of like the flip side of that one. They're both kind of the same, right? Take credit for the good stuff and blame other people for the bad stuff. It seems like this is in violation of the 5th and 8th commandments, violating integrity, basically. It's deceptive. It also seems to conflict with rule number 2 and 23, because it requires you to act indirectly. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't like this one either. Rule number 27, create a cult. Well, this is basically in violation of the first commandment, to honor God above all others. And this is basically saying, like, get people to worship you. Okay. If that's what you want to do, then I think you're going to have a bad time. It's also violating the fourth commandment, honoring your father and mother, right? It's you're stepping outside of the normative hierarchy and creating your own hierarchy that's independent from the central structure. And the idea of saints is that you can be part of a cult of a saint because the saints are spliced firmly into that hierarchy, right? They are in inviolable alignment with God's will. And so you can step into the hierarchy of a saint and not step outside the main hierarchy. But this is basically saying, while you're still alive, create your own cult, and that risks, breaking off from the main stem, breaking off from Christ, the vine. So, yeah. Immoral also seems to conflict with number 18, hide in crowds, not in castles. Well, if you've got your own cult and there's all these people gathered around you, like, that's basically a castle, right? You've created a fortress, a social fortress around yourself. and it's not going to be easy to get out of that. And then people know where you are, know where to find you. So yeah, seems like that that doesn't work well with Rule 18. 28, act boldly or not at all. This one I think is actually good advice. Yeah, if you're going to do something, then don't do it half-heartedly. Don't kind of like timidly test it out, like commit to it, commit. So, but then this seems to violate Rule 26. Oh, and also Rule 2, right? Or no, where is it? Don't commit to anyone. Don't commit to anyone. 20, number 20. Yeah, so this is also Rule 20. Don't commit to anyone. It's like, well, are you going to commit or not, right? So yeah, I think 28, that's good advice. Act boldly or not at all. 29, plan all the way to the end. Again, I think this is good advice, but it seems to violate rule number 17, inverted, be unpredictable. If you're going to be unpredictable, then you have to assume that other people are going to be unpredictable. And if other people are as unpredictable as you are trying to be, then it's going to be very difficult to plan all the way to the end. But in general, I think planning all the way to the end is a great idea. There's a tendency, again in chess, there's a tendency to be like, well, I'm going to do this and this and this, and then things are going to be good. And it's like, well, but their king isn't in check, and you haven't taken any material, and like your board position isn't actually that much better. So like, what's your plan actually? Is it just like, oh, I get to dictate what moves they make, and that's going to be good? Like, no, that's not a plan. Plan all the way. Or like, going camping or whatever. It's like, okay, we're going to go camping. So I guess pack the tent and the sleeping bags and let's go. It's like, well, you didn't plan all the way to the end. Like, you're going to get there and you're going to want some firewood, and you're going to want like something to eat, and you're going to want your toothbrush and maybe some spare clothes, and like, and then you're going to be able to get there, but then you're going to have to come back. So you're going to want, like something to read in the car, and, all this stuff, right? Like, plan all the way there and all the way back, and like, complete the plan. Don't just like be like, oh, well, it's going to be fun and let's just do this thing. It's like, no, be serious about this. This is important. You got to plan all the way to the end. Or like in engineering, right? You plan all the way through install and support. You don't be like, well, we're just going to build this thing. It's like, well, yeah, but how are you when it breaks, how are you going to take it apart? And like, where are you going to find the spare parts? And how many spares are you going to have on hand? And like, when you get there, how are you going to get it through the door and make sure that they've got a forklift big enough to move it around, and all this stuff, right? Like, you plan all the way through so that you're not surprised by stuff. So yeah, great idea. Just seems to violate rule of power number 17. Number 30, feign effortlessness. It conflicts with so the idea is that pretend no matter how hard you're working that you're not working at all. It violates the third commandment because the third commandment is to rest, right? To actually work on 6 days and then actually rest on the 7th day. And if you are, it risks violating that commandment. It conflicts with it, right? Because you should be actually working. And if you're working as hard as you can, you won't have spare effort to pretend that you're not working as hard as you can. Basically, you're going to be spending extra effort to not look like you're working hard. So I don't know if that's a good advice. And then also kind of risks violating Rule 8 again, because if you're working hard and pretending you're not, then you might be making other people look like they're not working hard when they really should be. So I don't know. Feign effortlessness, it's an ideal. Like, ideally, even when you're working hard, you should have perfected your skill to the degree that it is effortless. Like, it's not hard to work even when you're working hard. Maybe, or maybe you are just resting on your laurels, and you should like get up and actually work hard. Do the things that you're doing already well, and do other things so that you can get good at those too. So I don't know. Feign effortlessness. I'm not sure about that one. It also kind of looks like sloth, but maybe I'll add that. Sloth. All right. Rule 31, limit the options. So this is basically, don't let people think that they have options to do things that you don't like. Just give them, constrain the way they think about things to the ways that you are willing to let them act. So, there's like 5 things that people could reasonably do, but only 2 of them are good for you. So just make sure that they think that those are the only 2 options, the ones that are good for you. Just make sure that they don't think about those other 3 options, or take them off the table somehow, or make sure to badmouth those other options so that they don't appear to be valid ones. In addition to being deceptive, it seems like it is in violation of the 9th commandment, because if you are you're supposed to not covet. You're supposed to not suborn your desires to the appearance of other people's desires. And it seems like this is saying you should suborn other people's desires to your desires. So it's an inversion. It's trying to get other people to violate the 9th commandment. Seems like, which is also like my problem with marketing in general, or pathological marketing, I guess. Like, there's nothing wrong with telling people truthfully about the product or service that you have available, but trying to get them to want it when they don't actually want it is a violation of the 9th commandment. So yeah, don't covet. It's bad. Bad for you, bad for everyone. Number 32, portray fantasy, not reality. Well, I mean, this is just like number 2, number 5, number 8. Like, no, that's not good. Number 33, exploit everyone's weakness. Yeah, violation of the 5th commandment, probably of the 9th. There's a passage in the New Testament, 2 Timothy, I think. Bear with others' weaknesses and make the path straight so that the lame do not stumble. Something like that, right? Like, try to accommodate others' weaknesses so that they don't have a problem, instead of exploiting their weaknesses so that they definitely do have a problem. Number 34, act the part. This is basically, I think the actual rule is something like, behave in a kingly manner if you desire to be a king, or something like that. It's long-winded. Basically, the idea is act the part. If you're trying to do something, if you're trying to be someone, then pretend to be that person. Fake it till you make it. That's another way of saying it. So, again, this isn't wrong. I don't know how I feel about it. I'm an actor myself, so like, I've tried to really strictly distinguish those things. When I'm acting, and when I'm not acting, I'm being genuine. So I try to keep those things really separate so that I don't get confused about that, and so I don't confuse anyone else about it with those things intermingling together. So I try to not do this personally. I don't really have a problem with it, I guess. It just seems questionable. Seems dangerous to me. It seems like living in fantasy too, like in Rule 32. That's kind of a similar thing. So this is like deceive others with a fantasy, and this is basically deceive yourself with a fantasy, and that doesn't seem good. It also seems to be in contradiction with rule number 1 and 3, as so many of these are. Act the part. Okay, number 35, master timing and go with the tide. So this one, again, I think is actually good advice. Like, know when it's time to act and act swiftly. Realize even when you want something badly when it's not the right time, and be patient. And yeah, I think this is good advice. Number 35. Number 36, despise what you cannot obtain. So this seems to be violating Rule 8. It's dishonest. Or Commandment 8 and Commandment 9, do not covet. So this is basically like the inversion of Rule 9. To covet something is desire something that someone else desires. This is basically saying don't desire what you actually do desire. Like, if you want to obtain something but you can't, then like destroy that desire in yourself. So I don't know if that's actually wrong. It doesn't seem healthy. Because if you actually do have a desire that is legitimate and genuine, then just because you can't see a way to get there doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. I guess it's, set your eye on a lofty goal is kind of the rebuke to this rule. Anyway, 37. Rule number 37. Rule of power number 37. Dazzle with spectacle. Uh, yeah, okay. Like, you can, kind of a spectacle. There's nothing wrong with that, I guess. It is kind of frivolous, I guess, but, it seems alright. It does seem to violate, again, rule of power 1, 5, and 18. If you're throwing a spectacle, then it's hard to remain unnoticed. Fit in, no matter your personal opinions. So this is basically saying you can have weird ideas about things, and you can even practice them quietly in private, but in public, you would better toe the line and go along with the flow and, stay in the herd, because if you stick out, then people aren't going to trust you. And seems to violate commandment number 9. I don't like, I'm really disagreeable, so I just don't like this as a matter of personality, but I don't know that there's anything really wrong with it. Again, as long as you're not suborning your own desires to the desires of others, or allowing... See, this is kind of difficult, because if you have a personal view, if you have a view of something, that something is best or not best, or wrong or right or something, then those views will actually get stronger if you practice them, and weaker if you don't practice them. So, like, he's basically saying, like, act in public as if you do lead a double life, I guess is another way to say this. Lead a double life. Only let those really close to you understand your unpopular opinions, and know that you have unpopular ideas. And this happens a lot in modern day. People do this all the time. And I just don't think it's healthy. Like, it's kind of speak the truth, or at least don't lie, I guess, is kind of the way it goes. Especially in view of win with actions, not with words. Yeah, rule number 9. Like, if you're going to act instead of speak, and you will act on things you don't believe in instead of speaking them and acting on the things that you do believe in, then it seems like you're going to lose, right? Like, yourself, your true self is going to lose. Like, you will become what you act out. So it doesn't seem like it's good to act out things you don't believe. And I think Jordan Peterson would agree with that as well. Rule number 39, stay calm but enrage your foes. So the only thing I can see that's wrong with this is that there's a principle that a wise man makes peace, knows how to make peace, and and if where possible, live at peace with everyone. So while it is a good idea to stay calm when possible, there is also a place for righteous anger. And although the anger of man does not accomplish the righteousness of God. So that's another counterpoint. But also the Proverbs talk a lot about, like, don't enrage someone unnecessarily. Like, that's not a good plan. So I feel like the Proverbs have a lot of advice about that rebuke Rule 39. Rule 40, despise free lunch. Basically, if someone's giving away something for free, then it's not actually free, and you got to be careful. And if something is worth something, then pay for it. Don't just try to get a discount or whatever. Basically, pay the full price if you want something nice. Which, okay, that could be good. The downside of this is that it seems to feed into pride, and I see this a lot in people. And I'm tempted to it myself. Of, well, I'm too good to take your charity, right? And it's like, well, you're not, though. You're not too good. Nobody is. So I think there's a place for humbling yourself and accepting others' largesse. So, yeah. Rule 41, do not wear a great man's shoes. This is basically like, fourth commandment, who needs it? And I don't agree. I think the fourth commandment is important. So, honor your father and mother. Number 42, cut off the head. So this is like if there's a whole group of people and they're causing problems for you, find the leader and get rid of them. And like, doesn't mean necessarily kill them outright, but the idea is that take out the leader, and the rule itself, I think he calls it strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter, which informatively is the quote, which is also a saying. The person is quoting a saying, I believe it's the chief priest, about Jesus. Strike the shepherd, right? I'm the good shepherd. Well, strike the shepherd. It's like, okay, do you really want to be that guy? Do you want to be Caiaphas? I don't. So, yeah, it's important to acknowledge who's in leadership, and like if you have a real beef with someone, if with a whole group or whatever, like attack the leader. But the spirit behind it seems a bit malevolent. 43. Prefer seduction to force. So, in general, I think that when you can get someone to do something of their own free will instead of coercing them, that's good. On the other hand, like seduction itself, he has this thing about seduction. It's like, I don't know if seduction's actually the right word for what it is that one could pursue with an upright spirit. So it seems to violate the fifth commandment and also the ninth commandment, right? Because you're violating other people's, you're getting people to covet things instead of doing what they want. So, yeah, prefer to not coerce. It seems like a good rule, but like prefer seduction. I don't know. That's makes me uneasy. Rule number 44: mirrors, hide, and mocks. This is like mirroring it with action, like copying people and things like that. And seems again to violate the ninth commandment, thou shalt not covet, but not a bad idea where one can get away with it, right? Like if you're playing in chess, you can use the mirror strategy, right? Just like make the mirror move of whatever your opponent's doing, especially in setup where there's the symmetry. His idea or his justification seems to be that it hides what you're doing from others and makes them feel like they're being mocked because you're just copying them, and they're like, oh, well, why are you copying me? Why are you copying me? Right? This is really annoying. So that can work, I guess. I would prefer to just have a better plan than the other guy and like do that, and then you don't have to mirror them, right? Then you're just going to do the better thing, and they can go and do their thing. They can mirror you if they want, but they're going to be one step behind the whole time, so that's fine. Number 45, preach change but move slow. This is probably not bad advice. So he's basically saying admit that things are not as good as they could be, and try to acknowledge where they could get better, but don't try to change things too quickly. Take small steps and only when necessary. And this is basically like be an intellectual liberal but a practical conservative. It's like, okay, yeah, there's there's some good wisdom in that. So yeah, I think that makes sense. It does seem to conflict with rule number 28: act boldly or not at all. If you're gonna make slow, small steps, and it doesn't seem like bold action. But again, you don't have to follow all the rules all the time. There can be circumstantial conditions. Rule number 46: never appear too perfect. So this is basically like cultivate small vices, small harmless vices, so that others don't think that you're too good and hate you because you're too good. It's basically like account for other people's. It's never outshine the master all over again. The same idea. Don't inflame others' pride and envy. And I just don't think that we should make accommodations for those kind of voluntary failures. Like, if someone else is prideful and envious, that's their problem, and they got to deal with it. And like, if you're going to be as good as you can be, then that's great. You should be. And don't hobble yourself just because other people might feel bad about themselves because you're doing well, right? And I think Jordan Peterson would agree with me there as well. So it also seems to violate the Eighth Commandment to a certain degree. I'm being kind of liberal with Eighth Commandment violations here, but you understand where I'm coming from. Number 47, do not overshoot. This is good advice. I don't see anything wrong with this. This is basically aim for the mark. Don't aim beyond it. If you are trying to achieve victory, then when you get there, the specifics in the specific cases, when you achieve victory, when you get there, don't let it go to your head and just get what you came for and then go home. Don't just run away with it, because people will really resent it if you are a sore winner, basically. Don't be a sore winner. But I think the principle is generalized, like shooting over the target isn't good. Shooting over the target is as bad as shooting shy of it. Like, you want to hit the mark. Don't sin, right? Hit the mark. Hit it exactly. Aim for the target. Don't just be like, well, I get as far as I want. So, yeah. And then Rule 48, assume formlessness. Basically, you can't be defeated if you're like the ocean or like a river, right? Like, it's just going to keep going. Don't be too strong. Don't be too hard. Don't be too rigid. Flow. And this is kind of a feminine thing, like the Oedipal one. Where is it? Rule 11. Keep others dependent on you. This one is also kind of drawing on the feminine side. And I think all of these rules of power do have this kind of appeal to the feminine nature of being catty, as opposed to being forthright and and strong. And I think the reason for that is that this is, again, going back to the courtier thing, right? Like, play the perfect courtier. The idea is that you're in the presence of the masculine. There's a masculine. There's a king, and then he has a court, and you are in the court. And so the king is the masculine, and then all the courtiers are the feminine. And so assume the feminine role, be catty and clever and manipulative, and don't do anything too grandiose and flatter people and stuff, right? Like, assume all these feminine qualities so that you don't get in a masculine conflict with the guy at the top. So assume formlessness. Again, there's nothing wrong with the feminine aspects, but it also seems to be advice given to men, and I feel like men should be masculine, and the king needs people who are masculine as well. So I don't know. Seems too feminine to me. It also seems to violate rule of power number 23 and 28. If you're going to draw attention to yourself, it's hard to be formless. And reputation and all that stuff. There's a bunch more that this violates. I mean, being the last one, I could put almost every rule on there. But anyway. So that is the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. There's some good ones in there. There's some good ones. There's some good advice. But in general, it seems more dangerous than helpful. So that's where we're at. Where are we at? Concurrent viewers, 0. All right. Nobody watched this. Good. All right. Well, I hope that's been helpful. If you would still like to read it, it's available at your local bookstore, I'm sure. And it's quite a tome. It's a big old heavy, thick tome. And I wouldn't mind going through, maybe I will, go through the chapters talking about the ones that I felt like were good ideas and reading through those. And there's certainly, I guess the other way to think about these rules are, even if you're not going to do these things yourself, it might not be a bad idea to recognize that you are the kind of person who could do these things. This is like incorporating your shadow, right? You're the kind of person who could be manipulative in all these ways and deceptive in all these ways. And so be aware of that and acknowledge it. And then when the temptation arises, you might be able to recognize it as a temptation instead of just thinking, oh, well, I could never be a bad person like that, so I'll just do whatever it is I want. And also, it is important to recognize that other people may do this to you. I've had multiple times where I've run across people who are behaving in these kind of ways, where I can see that they're trying to manipulate me into doing what they want, and then making it easy for them to take the credit for it and all that stuff. And it's like, okay, I see what you're trying to do. I'm not going to play that game, and I'm not going to play into that game. I'm going to do what's right. But I see what's happening here, and it allows you to brace against it, I guess, to a certain degree, where you can be like, okay, I can see where I could be taken advantage of in this way, so I'm just gonna be cautious, or do these a few extra steps to kind of head that off, as it were. So yeah, they aren't bad principles to be aware of, but I think that a lot of these things are very dangerous to put into practice. So that's it from me. Hope you all enjoyed. I'll see